Welcome to Twilight Fables, where forgotten tales are given new shadows and the stories you thought you knew are twisted into darker shapes. Tonight, we walk the icy streets of a nameless city where a little girl carries a bundle of matches and a fate that flickers in the dark. This is The Little Match Girl, Ashes in the Snow. The snow had been falling since morning. Thick, heavy flakes drifted down from the grey sky and collected in heaps along the cobblestone streets, burying everything in silence. Horses' hooves clopped dully against the stones, muffled by the cold, and the wheels of wagons cut dark grooves through the powder. The gas lamps flickered weakly against the storm, the halos of light hazed by the endless flurry. But no one looked up. The people of the city kept their eyes down, their scarves wrapped tight, their gloved hands buried in their coats. The air was too sharp, biting with each breath, searing the inside of lungs. The cold had a way of pressing against the skin like knives, of slipping through cloth and flesh alike, making even the most well-fed folk hunch forward and hurry through the storm. And then there was her. She was a small figure among them, nearly lost in the drifting snow. No coat, no hat. Her thin dress clung to her as the wet flakes melted and froze again, stiffening the fabric until it cracked when she moved. Her feet were bare, red against the white, the skin split and raw from the stones beneath. She left tiny tracks of blood in the snow, quickly covered and swallowed by the storm. She clutched a bundle of matches in her hands, long, thin sticks, tied in ragged twine, the last thing she had to sell. Her lips were blue. Her breath came in quick, shallow gasps, fogging the air before her face. She whispered to herself sometimes, small, desperate murmurs, no louder than the wind. People passed her without listening. They passed her without even seeing. At least, she hoped they didn't see. For when she lifted her gaze, when her hollow eyes searched the crowd, she noticed something wrong. Their faces, the passers-by hurried through the snow, but their faces seemed blurred, as though the storm itself had rubbed them away. Some were pale ovals, with only the faintest suggestion of a mouth or nose. Others had no features at all, just blank, grey masks of skin. And yet they walked, heads lowered, hands clutching parcels or the arms of companions, as though they were whole. When the girl blinked, sometimes the faces sharpened again, a moustache, a pair of sharp eyes, the painted lips of a woman beneath her furs. But then they would smear back into nothingness, and she would have to look away, heart hammering. It wasn't just the storm. She knew the difference between snow in her eyes and what she saw now. The city itself seemed wrong. The buildings leaned inward, their windows glimmering with faint light, though she saw no lamps inside. The streets, twisted oddly, as though they were never quite the same from one moment to the next. She would look back and realise she had walked past the same bakery twice, though she had never turned. The little girl shivered violently and pulled the matches closer to her chest. She had not sold a single one. "Please," she whispered, though no one turned to hear. "Just one match, only one." Her voice was lost in the storm. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. The cold made time difficult to measure. Her teeth chattered until her jaw ached. The bundle of matches slipped in her hands, damp from melted snow, and she nearly dropped them. It was then she heard it, a voice, not a voice like the people around her, not the gruff mutter of a man to his wife, not the shrill laughter of young girls with their coats drawn tight. This voice was softer, lower, almost like the sound of the wind crawling through a crack in the shutters. "Strike it!" The girl froze, her breath caught in her throat. She spun in the snow, clutching the matches tighter, her eyes scanning the street. But no one had spoken. The faceless crowd pushed past her, their blurred heads bobbing. No eyes met hers, no mouths had moved. Still, she heard it again. "Strike it, little one. Strike and be warm." Her thin fingers trembled against the wood. She wanted to. She wanted it more than anything. The cold had burrowed deep into her bones, and her body felt heavy, slow, as though each step might topple her into the snow for good. But she hesitated. Matches were precious. They were the last of her hope. If she burned them, she could not sell them. The voice seemed to sense her fear. "One is enough. One is nothing. Warm yourself. See the light. Strike it." The girl squeezed her eyes shut. Tears froze against her lashes. She shook her head. "No," she whispered. "I must sell them. I must." But when she opened her eyes again, the crowd was gone. The street stretched before her, empty, silent, blanketed in snow. Not a single figure remained, only the crooked houses, their windows dim, and the snow falling endlessly from the dark sky. Her heart lurched. She turned, stumbling, searching for anyone, but the world had gone still. The city was abandoned, and in the silence the whisper came again, softer, curling against her ear like frost. "Strike it, child. See what waits." Her frozen hand shook. She pulled a single match free from the bundle. Her breath rattled in her chest as she raised it. The head of the match flared against the stone. Light blossomed in the darkness, and the world changed. The match flared to life, and for a moment the little girl thought the storm had broken. Golden fire bloomed at the tip, spilling warmth that reached her frozen fingers, her raw skin. She gasped at the sudden relief, clutching the stick as though it were a treasure. The flames licked upward, steady and bright, unbothered by the wind. The world seemed to retreat. The storm faded into silence. The snow no longer stung her skin. For the first time in days, she felt something like warmth. She smiled, a small, cracked thing, and lean closer, and there it was, a fire, not a tiny flame licking a sliver of wood, but a hearth, vast and glowing. She found herself sitting before it, the stone floor warm against her legs, the light pouring over her. The flames roared within the fireplace, tall and hungry, casting long shadows across the walls. Her body sagged with relief, the ache in her bones dulled. She stretched her hands toward the blaze, fingers trembling as they thawed. For a moment, she almost believed she was safe, but then she noticed the hands. They were not hers. Pale, thin hands moved within the fire itself, long fingers curling and uncurling in rhythm with the flames. They reached up as though stirring the coals, as though shaping the fire's dance. Their skin was blistered and blackened, yet they moved with purpose, never faltering. The girl froze. The warmth that had felt like comfort now pressed too deep, like heat burrowing into her marrow. Her heart thumped painfully in her chest. She wanted to look away, to close her eyes, to let the illusion dissolve, but the fire held her in place. The hands rose higher, stretching up through the flames. They twisted and writhed, too many joints, too long, their skin flaking like burned paper. She thought she saw faces flicker in the coals, gaunt, hollow-eyed, their mouths wide in silent screams. The fire was feeding on them, or worse, they were the fire. The girl whimpered softly, clutching the burning matchstick tighter, though she longed to let it fall. The whispering voice returned, curling around her in the glow. Warm, isn't it? Warmer than the snow, warmer than the street. Stay, stay by the fire. Her lips quivered. It hurts. All warmth does. The voice sighed, sweet as smoke. All comfort burns. But would you rather freeze? The hands in the flames reached outward, stretching closer, curling toward her as if they meant to pluck her up and draw her into the hearth. She stumbled backward, heart pounding, clutching the match like a lifeline. But then, just as the hands touched the edge of the world, the flame sputtered, the match hissed and died, leaving only a thread of smoke that curled into the night. The vision dissolved, the hearth vanished, the warmth drained from her skin. The girl was once again alone in the street, shivering violently, her breath ragged. The snow fell thick and heavy, soaking into her dress. The silence of the city returned, pressing close. But something had changed. The darkness was deeper now. The lamps that once lined the street no longer glowed. The windows of the houses were dark, their shutters drawn, their glass like blind eyes. The emptiness of the world pressed down on her, heavier than before, as though the light she had seen had stolen what little brightness remained. And she wasn't alone. Shapes lingered at the edges of the street, not people, not shadows, but something between. Their outlines flickered faintly, like smoke caught in the wind. They leaned forward, watching her, heads bent low, her stomach clenched with fear. She stumbled back a step, her bare foot crunching against the snow. The whisper returned, curling behind her ear. Strike another. The dark is worse than the flame. Strike another, little one. She clutched the bundle of matches against her chest. Her body screamed for warmth. The storm gnawed at her skin, at her bones. The shapes in the dark shifted, inching closer. Her trembling hands pulled another match free. The spark hissed against the stone. Light bloomed again. She was standing before a table. It stretched the length of the room, draped in a cloth of velvet. Silver candlesticks gleamed, their flames steady and golden. Platters were spread across the surface, roasted meats, bowls of steaming soup, loaves of bread soft and round, fruits piled high and glistening with juice. The girl's mouth watered, her stomach cramped with hunger, the ache so sharp she nearly doubled over. She could smell the food, rich and heavy, more than she had ever known. Her eyes darted to the goose, a fat, golden brown bird, placed at the centre of the feast. Its skin gleamed with juices, its wings folded tight, its body stuffed with herbs and apples. Her hands trembled. She reached toward it, and then it moved. The goose's head twisted, its neck cracking unnaturally as it turned to face her. Its eyes opened, not the glassy eyes of death, but bright, beady, alive. Its beak clacked once, sharp and wet. The girl stumbled backward, a cry tearing from her throat. The goose lifted itself from the platter. Its roasted legs twitched and bent, pulling it upright. Its wings unfolded with a snap, sending bits of crisp skin falling to the table. It stepped forward, one claw scraping against the velvet cloth. The faceless guests around the table did not stir. They sat frozen in their chairs, heads bowed, hands moving slowly to lift food to mouths that were little more than holes. They chewed and chewed, though nothing passed their lips. The goose leapt from the table. The girl screamed. She dropped the match. Darkness swallowed the world. The snow was falling again. The storm howled through the empty street, but she could still smell it. Roasted flesh, sharp herbs. The taste lingered on her tongue, though she had eaten nothing, and in the corner of her vision, she thought she saw it, a dark shape in the snow, crouched low, beady eyes fixed on her, waiting. The whisper came again, more insistent. Another, little one, another. The flame will hide them. Only the flame can keep you safe. Her hand shook as she reached for the next match. The girl's fingers fumbled with the bundle of matches. The wind tore through the street, sharp as knives lashing her bare arms. Her skin was numb, her breath shallow. She tried to pull her dress tighter around herself, but the fabric was stiff with frost. The whisper lingered, curling at the edges of her hearing like smoke. Another child, another. The dark grows hungrier with every breath. Only the flame will feed it. She pulled a match free. Her hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped it. Her nails were cracked, her fingertips raw and bleeding. She struck it against the stone. The spark leapt to life. brighter than before. The flame swelled upward, golden and hungry, wrapping her in warmth. The darkness peeled back, and the world shifted. She was standing in a hall she had never seen before. The ceiling soared high above her, vanishing into shadow. The walls shimmered faintly, carved with patterns of ivy and roses. A hush lay over the room, broken only by the faint crackle of candlelight. At the centre stood a tree. It was the tallest she had ever seen, stretching upward until its crown disappeared into the darkness of the rafters. Its branches were thick with needles, each glimmering as though dusted with stars. Candles nestled among them, their flames steady, casting 1,000 little halos of light. Ornaments hung from the boughs, glass globes that glittered in red and green, silver bells that chimed faintly when the branches stirred. The girl's lips parted in awe, her breath caught in her throat. She had never seen beauty like this. The candle's warmth brushed her face, thawing her skin. The colours glowed so brightly it hurt her eyes, but she could not look away. Her heart swelled, filling with something that almost felt like joy. Almost. For when she looked closer, the ornaments were not what they seemed. The glass globes were not smooth. Their surfaces rippled faintly, as though something moved beneath. She squinted, her thin hands rising toward the nearest one. Inside the sphere, a face pressed against the glass, small, pale, lips trembling as though frozen mid-cry. Its eyes rolled wildly, its tiny fists hammering uselessly against the walls of its prison. The girl gasped, stumbling backward. Her heart lurched in terror. She looked to the next ornament. Another face, a boy this time, his mouth open in a silent scream. And the next, and the next. Children, dozens of them, their features blurred by glass, their bodies contorted, each one trapped in silence. She turned her gaze to the candles. Their flames burned too dark, not golden, not orange, but black at the edges, dripping long trails of wax the colour of ink. The wax oozed down the needles, staining them. Wherever it touched, the green turned brittle and black, curling into ash. Her breath quickened. She staggered backward again, but her bare heel struck something hard. She spun. Roots. The tree's roots burst through the floor, thick and twisted. They writhed across the stone, coiling toward her like serpents. Their bark split open in places, revealing pale flesh beneath, flesh studded with tiny teeth, gnashing faintly as though tasting the air. The girl's chest heaved. The whispers returned, so bright, is it not? So full of joy. Each child who struck a flame has found their place here, hanging, gleaming, eternal. Will you join them, little one? Will you shine too? No, her voice cracked. No, I don't want to. Another match. Higher, higher, light them all, burn and see. Only then will you be free. The tree's branches swayed, though no wind stirred the hall. The ornaments chimed against one another, faces twisting inside their glass prisons. Some looked at her, their eyes were hollow, desperate, their mouths formed shapes she could not hear. The roots surged closer, teeth snapping. The girl cried out, dropping the match. Darkness slammed down like a curtain. The snow returned. She stood in the street once more, her thin shoulders shaking with sobs. Her knees buckled, sinking into the drift. She pressed her hands to her eyes, wishing the vision gone, wishing the whispers silenced. But when she lowered her hands, the world had changed again. The street was no longer empty. Figures stood along the walls of the buildings. Not people, not shadows. They were children, dozens of them. Their outlines glowed faintly, blue and thin, as though cut from smoke. Their eyes were hollow. Their mouths did not move. They stared at her, their heads tilted slightly, waiting. She gasped, stumbling backward. Her heel struck the frozen stones. The whisper came again, though now it seemed to echo from the hollow mouths around her. Strike again, little one, strike again. See more, be more. The flame will keep you, the flame will take you. Her hands shook violently. Her chest hurt with each breath. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. The storm raged harder, whipping her thin hair against her face. She could not stand the cold. She could not bear the staring eyes. She pulled another match free. Her bloodied fingers struck it. The flame bloomed brighter than ever. Her grandmother was there. She stood only a few steps away, cloaked in light. Her face, soft, smiling. The girl's breath caught. "Grandmother!" she cried, stumbling forward. Her chest ached with sudden joy, sudden relief, as though her heart had been torn open and filled again all at once. The old woman reached her arms wide, beckoning, but something was wrong. Her hands were too long, her arms stretched impossibly, sleeves tearing, skin pale and thin as parchment. Her smile spread wider, too wide, until it split her face. Her eyes gleamed darkly, deeper than any human gaze. "Come closer, little one," the voice whispered, though the grandmother's mouth never moved. "Closer, strike another, do not let me fade." The girl faltered, her steps slowing. Her grandmother's arms twitched, jerking like broken marionette strings. Her fingers curled, reaching. Her smile never dimmed. The flame guttered. "No!" the girl screamed. "Don't go. Please don't leave me again." She struck another match before the last flame could die. Light blazed. Her grandmother loomed closer, sharper, darker. Her eyes glowed like coals. "One more," the voice crooned. "Always one more. Burn them all, little one. Burn them all." The flame of the match flared, stretching upward, filling the darkness with a glow that pressed against the edges of her vision. The cold gnawed at her fingers and toes, but the warmth of the flame wrapped around her like a fleeting promise, fragile and fleeting as a butterfly's wing. Her grandmother's figure hovered before her, closer now, the pale light of the flame illuminating the unnatural contours of her body. The arms, impossibly long, reached toward the girl, fingers bending and twisting, as though they obeyed a will not entirely her own. The smile had stretched too far, the eyes glimmering darkly, empty, yet burning with something ancient. The girl stepped back, tripping over the icy stones, clutching the matches desperately. "Grandmother, you're not right," she stammered. Her teeth chattered, though she was trembling from more than just the cold. The figure tilted her head, the movement jerky, inhuman. "Strike another match," the voice whispered, emanating from the grandmother's hollow gaze. "You must see, you must know. Only the flame will keep the dark from taking you." The girl shook her head. Her fingers were raw and red from holding the matches. Her wrists scraped against the cobblestones. "No, no, I don't want to." The grandmother's form seemed to ripple, like wax melting under heat. The light from the match flickered against her, and for a moment the girl glimpsed the truth. Her grandmother was not her grandmother. The face she loved was beneath the mask, twisted and stretched, the mouth open too wide, the eyes deep and hollow, and behind that mask, something older, darker, waiting, an entity that had been feeding on the light of children's hopes for years. It had taken the shape of warmth and comfort, of memory, of safety, but it was not safe. It was hungry, her chest constricted with fear. She realized what the whispers had been coaxing her to do all along. The matches were not just light, not just warmth, they were doors. Each strike flung her closer to the fire, to the heat, to the entity that hungered in shadows she could not yet fully perceive. She stumbled backward, nearly falling into the snow. Her legs shook, unsteady, but the figure advanced. The shadows of the street seemed to stretch with her grandmother, curling and twisting toward her, hungry, patient, eternal. "One more," the voice breathed, soft as smoke curling around her ears. "One more, and you will see. One more, and you will know." The little girl pressed the remaining matches to her chest. She could feel the rough edges of the wood against her raw fingers. She could feel the snow melting into the fabric of her dress, soaking through to her skin, freezing against her. And yet the whisper continued. "One more, only one more. Strike it, child." Her lips trembled. She could not speak. Her throat felt frozen, paralyzed with fear. But her hand rose, fingers shaking, pulling one match free from the bundle. The head of it cracked against the rough cobblestone. The spark flared. The vision opened before her like a door into another world. She stood in a room that glimmered with light, more radiant than the sun itself. A Christmas tree towered above her once again, candles burning black and gold, ornaments glowing with faces of children who had struck too many matches before her. Their eyes seemed to flicker, alive, desperate, begging silently for release. The little girl's stomach twisted. She realized she was not looking at warmth. She was looking at a trap. The tree's roots writhed through the floor, moving toward her as if sensing her presence, as though hungry for the warmth she carried in her blood. The faces in the ornaments shifted toward her, their eyes wide, their mouths opening in silent screams. Some twisted, others contorted in frozen terror. Each one seemed to whisper a warning that she could not hear, a story that the wind of the flame carried away. The grandmother's figure loomed beside the tree, larger now, more monstrous. The arms extended impossibly long, the fingers curling, reaching, beckoning. Her smile was too wide, too sharp, the eyes darker than the blackest coals. The voice coiled around the girl's mind. Strike it again, child. The dark waits. Only the flame can protect you. Strike and see. The girl stumbled backward, nearly collapsing into the roots of the tree. Their bark split and shifted, revealing teeth along the edges, rows of jagged enamel that scraped against the stone. As the roots inched closer, the creature beneath the form of her grandmother, breathed a sigh that carried the smell of smoke and rot. I don't want to, she whispered, voice trembling. Strike. The match flared in her fingers, and the fire revealed more than the girl could bear. The walls of the room seemed to breathe. They throbbed with a faint light, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The children's faces inside the ornaments moved subtly now, their tiny bodies twisting toward her, mouths opening and closing. The black wax from the candles dripped onto the branches, steaming as it touched the floor. The floorboards themselves seemed alive, shifting beneath her feet. The roots writhed and stretched, rising higher, coiling as though to pull her down, to claim her for the fire. She stumbled, nearly falling, her match flaring again. The flame illuminated the grandmother's true form, a shadow beneath a shadow, a thing ancient, endless, feeding on the light of hope and the warmth of fear. Strike, child, strike and see. You must join them. You must burn. The girl's heart pounded violently. She understood now. The matches were not warmth. They were not comfort. They were the keys. Each strike opened another door to this world, another layer of fire, another step closer to the entity that had been waiting for her, feeding on the innocence of children, cloaked in familiar faces to lure them in. Her stomach twisted with hunger, her limbs stiffened with cold. She wanted to run, but she could not. The roots coiled tighter, the ornaments turned toward her, and the grandmother's arms reached ever closer. One more strike. Her hand trembled as she raised the match. She closed her eyes, biting her lip to keep from screaming. The wind seemed to howl louder, but it was no longer the storm outside. It was the world itself, the fire breathing, waiting, patient, eternal. She struck it. The flame bloomed brighter than ever. The flame of the match leapt higher than the others, filling the street with light, so bright it made the shadows recoil. The little girl clutched it tightly, knuckles white, her entire body trembling with exhaustion, cold, and fear. She had already burned several matches, and with each one the visions had grown darker, more impossible, more horrifying. Her grandmother's figure loomed again, taller than before, her arms stretching in impossible lengths, the fingers twisting and curling like living tendrils. The familiar face was gone, replaced by something darker, something hollow. The eyes glowed faintly, embers at the centre of black voids. The smile was too wide, the teeth too sharp, too many, and they glistened with a wet, blackened sheen that reflected the flame in grotesque ripples. Another child, another. Do not let them touch you. Only the flame can hold them at bay. The girl's chest ached. Her breath came in ragged gasps, fogging the air before her. She could feel the cold seeping deeper than her skin, settling in her bones. Her feet were numb, her toes split and bleeding, but the thought of letting the entity reach her was worse than any frostbite or hunger. She struck another match. The world shifted once again. She was no longer on the cobblestone street. She stood in a vast chamber, the ceiling impossibly high, stretching into darkness. The walls shimmered faintly, etched with twisting patterns that seemed to writhe when she blinked. The floor was smooth, polished, yet it seemed to shift beneath her, bending slightly, as though alive. In the centre of the room, a fire burned, not a hearth, not a simple flame, but a blaze that stretched toward the ceiling, twisting and writhing like a living thing. Its colour was golden at the core, but black at the edges, smoke curling upward in patterns that reminded her of long dead faces. She shivered, unable to look away, and there it was, the grandmother figure, now fully monstrous, standing at the heart of the fire. Her arms were impossibly long, coiled around the blaze like serpents. Her face flickered, switching between memory and nightmare. Sometimes she looked like the woman the girl had loved, sometimes like a hollowed skeleton, sometimes like a creature so dark and immense it seemed to drink the light itself. The whispering came from everywhere. Strike again, strike and see. Only the flame will protect you. Only the flame will feed you. The girl's fingers shook violently. The bundle of matches was nearly gone. She pressed the remaining sticks to her chest, heart hammering. Her mind raced. She wanted to run, to throw herself into the snow, to escape, but she could not. The fire was too near. The roots of the tree from the previous vision creeping into this chamber, curling toward her feet, snapping with tiny teeth. She realized the truth. Each match, each spark, had not merely shown her visions, it had pulled her closer to the fire, closer to the entity that had been hiding beneath the faces she trusted, the warmth, the comfort, the visions of feasts, of trees, of her grandmother. All were lies, all were bait, and she had bitten. One more, the voice hissed. One more, only one more, and you will see the truth. Only one more, and the dark will be kept at bay for a moment. Her hand rose, trembling, pulling the final match free from the bundle. Her fingers were raw, her nails split, blood mixed with frost. She struck it against the stone. The flame burst to life. The chamber exploded with light. The grandmother's monstrous form advanced, coiling around the blaze, merging with the fire itself. The walls seemed to pulse, as though the room were breathing. The children in the ornaments, from the Christmas tree vision, now appeared along the edges of the chamber, pale and hollow-eyed, faces twisted in silent screams. They pressed forward, drawn by the flame, yet unable to step into it. The girl realized she could see the fire as it truly was, not warmth, not light, but a portal, a living, breathing thing that devoured what it touched, feeding on hope, on innocence, on the spark of life itself. And the grandmother, no, the entity, fed on it, cloaked in a form that had once been familiar, safe, comforting. Her stomach lurched. She wanted to drop the match, to flee, but her frozen fingers could not release it. Her entire body shook. She understood now. The fire would keep her alive, only so long as she continued to strike matches. Each spark was a tether, a temporary shield against the darkness that pressed ever closer. The whisper became louder, insistent, curling around her mind. Strike. Do not let the dark claim you. Strike again, child, and you will survive another moment. The girl's eyes flicked to the children at the edges of the chamber. Their hollow gazes met hers. She wanted to scream, to tell them she was sorry, to run, but the entity's gaze pinned her in place. It coiled around her like smoke. Inside and out, inside her bones and her mind. One more strike. Her hand rose trembling. She struck the match. The light revealed a new horror. The grandmother entity leaned closer, her fingers stretched impossibly, curling around the flames, reaching for the girl. Her face shifted and flickered, each blink revealing a different version of her, a grandmother she had loved, a skeleton, a monster of black fire, a childless shadow. And in the midst of it all, the girl realized something terrifying. The fire wanted her, not just her warmth, not just her fear, but her life itself. It had drawn her here, to the visions, to the matches, to the monster that waited behind memory and love. And with each strike, each flicker of flame, she had fed it, pulled it closer, The roots of the previous visions now writhed beneath her feet, teeth snapping, curling, pressing against her ankles. The children in the ornaments pressed forward, their faces twisted, mouths opening in silent pleas, and the grandmother entity reached, her arms coiling around the fire, fingers curling toward her like living tendrils. The little girl gasped. She had one last choice. One match remained, and the entity whispered, "Strike, little one, strike or be claimed." Her trembling fingers closed around the last stick of wood. She struck it. The flame erupted. It was no longer warmth. It was not light. It was a window into everything she feared, everything she had been drawn to, everything she had unknowingly fed. And the grandmother entity smiled, wider than the world, darker than the night, and whispered, "Now you see. Now you are mine, for the flame has claimed you." The last match flared to life in her trembling hands, throwing the darkness into sharp relief. The street, the snow, the crooked buildings, all vanished. She was no longer in the city. The storm had disappeared, leaving only signs of vast emptiness, and the flame burning bright enough to sear her eyes. The fire revealed the chamber in full, stretching wider than any street, taller than any building. Shadows clung to its walls, coiling like living smoke. The black and gold blaze at its centre wriggled and pulsed like a living heart, and within it the grandmother entity waited. No longer a familiar figure, no longer even remotely human. The thing coiled around the flame like a great shadowed serpent. Its eyes glimmered with ancient hunger. Its arms, impossibly long and covered in shifting darkness, reached toward her. Fingers curled and uncurled, beckoning, promising warmth, threatening pain. Its smile split its face entirely, revealing teeth blackened and gleaming. The little girl's heart pounded violently. She wanted to flee, wanted to hurl herself into the snow outside, but the flame wrapped around her, a tether she could not release. Every part of her screamed to drop the match. Every part of her body was frozen with the cold. Yet nothing outside of this fire and chamber existed anymore. The whisper circled her mind, omnipresent. Strike. One more, only one more, or be claimed. She understood now. Every match she had struck, every vision she had seen, the hearth, the feast, the Christmas tree, the twisted grandmother, they had not been gifts of warmth. They had been traps, each strike drawing her closer to this fire, closer to the entity that fed on hope and innocence. The warmth, the comfort, the fleeting joy, they had been lies. The flame was hunger, and it had come for her. Strike, the voice hissed. Everywhere and nowhere, strike and you will see. Strike or be consumed. Her stomach twisted, her teeth chattered. She shivered violently, not just from cold, but from fear. Her eyes darted to the edges of the chamber, and she saw them, the children, the ones in the ornaments, the ones at the edges of the visions, all pale and hollow-eyed. They watched her. They had been taken before, trapped in this fire, claimed by the entity that wore her grandmother's face. They were warnings and witnesses all at once. Her fingers clenched the matchstick tighter. She raised it. The flame flared. The world dissolved. She stood upon a frozen river of black flame, stretching infinitely in every direction. Shapes moved within it. Children, twisted and pale, eyes glowing faintly, mouths open in silent screams. They pressed forward, pulled by the heat, by the hunger, but the fire devoured them before they could reach her. The grandmother entity rose higher, larger than the chamber, stretching to touch the ceiling of this endless inferno. Its shadow stretched across the frozen flames, a wave of darkness curling toward her. It whispered, a sound like dry leaves scratching across stone. Join us. Only the flame can save you. Only the flame can keep the dark away for a moment. The girl's teeth chattered. Her body was trembling uncontrollably. She wanted to drop the match, to run, to sink into the snow and die, but she could not. The flame held her, tethered her, a cruel promise that it would not release her. The children in the flames reached toward her, fingers clawing at the edges of the light. Their faces were twisted in expressions of terror, agony, pleading. The girl realized with a sinking heart they were calling for her, begging her to understand, to stop, to flee. But she could not. The grandmother entity's face flickered, morphing between love and horror, warmth and terror. Its voice whispered everywhere, one more, only one more, strike and see, strike and survive. For a moment, her fingers shook violently. She pressed the final match to the rough stone at her feet. She struck it. The flame erupted, brighter than any other, burning her eyes, searing her mind, and the truth unfolded. The fire was alive. It was hunger. It was memory. It was pain and joy and fear and innocence twisted together, writhing endlessly. The grandmother entity was its keeper, its devourer, its guardian. It had taken the faces of those she loved, the memories she cherished, the warmth she sought, and turned them into bait, into chains. Each match she had struck had fed it, had bound her closer, and now, with the final match, there was no turning back. The children in the flames writhed and screamed silently, faces pressing to the light, mouths opening and closing. They were all around her. She could feel their cold, their hunger, their despair. They clawed at her, at the flame, at the edges of reality itself. The grandmother entity leaned closer, its face splitting wider, eyes glowing brighter. It whispered, a voice like fire and ash. You see now, you understand, you are mine, you cannot leave. The little girl's body shivered, her teeth chattered, her lips trembled. She wanted to scream, to cry, to plead, but the fire wrapped around her like a cage. She was trapped, and yet a thought sparked in her mind, a flicker of defiance. If the flame had taken everything, if the entity had deceived her, if it had fed on the warmth and hope of countless children, perhaps she could see it clearly, and perhaps she could endure it. The flame danced around her. The grandmother entity loomed. The children reached out, and she realized she was no longer simply a victim. She was part of this world now. She could see it, understand it, and survive within it. But at what cost? Her breath fogged before her. Her teeth chattered violently. Her fingers were numb, her toes raw. She pressed the matches to her chest, willing the flame to hold, to show, to protect. But she knew that protection was fleeting. The grandmother entity whispered again, "Strike, little one, strike and survive." For a moment, the girl's trembling hand moved, striking the match once more. The chamber erupted in searing light. The entity recoiled slightly, its shadow writhing and twisting. The children's faces glimmered faintly, their eyes locking on hers. And in that moment, the little girl understood the true nature of the flame. It was not just a trap, it was a doorway to survival, yes, but also a doorway to endless torment, an eternal cycle. She was trapped in its light, she was bound to it, but she could see, she could know, and that knowledge, faint as it was, gave her a shred of power. The grandmother entity hissed, a sound like fire scraping against stone, curling around her mind, promising warmth, promising death, promising everything she feared. And still, she held the match. The fire raged around her, and she faced it. The flame of the match pulsed in her trembling hands, a fragile tether to a reality that no longer existed. The snow, the street, the distant chimneys, all had vanished. She was suspended in a world built entirely of light and shadow, a place where fire was alive and cold, where hunger and memory merged into a single, impossible landscape. The grandmother entity loomed above her, larger now than she had imagined possible. Its arms, impossibly long, stretched like coiling shadows, reaching toward her. Its face flickered constantly, shifting between warmth and horror, memory and nightmare. One moment, it was the woman she had loved. The next, a twisted, hollow shell of black flame. Its eyes glimmered, a pair of burning coals that seemed to pierce through her very bones. The whispers circled her, omnipresent, echoing in the hollows of her mind. Strike, one more, only one more, and you will see the truth. Strike or be consumed. Her fingers clenched the matchstick so tightly that the wood cut into her raw skin. Her chest heaved with exhaustion, hunger, cold, and fear. She had burned every other match, each one pulling her closer to the heart of the entity. Now, with only the last flicker of light, she faced the culmination of every vision. The hearth, the feast, the Christmas tree, the hollow children, the fire that was alive, the grandmother who was not. The entity leaned closer, its head tilting impossibly, the smile splitting wider, teeth glinting like shards of obsidian. Its whispers were now everywhere, curling around her mind. Strike, little one, strike, and survive. For a moment, she raised the final match, trembling violently. The flame leapt to life, brighter than ever, illuminating the vast chamber. The children in the flames, pale, hollow-eyed, frozen in silent torment, turned toward her. They reached, their hands stretching, pulling, clawing at the edges of the light, their mouths moving in silent pleas. The grandmother entity coiled around the blaze, arms twisting, fingers curling like living tendrils. Its eyes blazed, burning away the remnants of the world she had known. And then it spoke, its voice curling around her mind, a sound like smoke scraping against stone. You belong to the flame now. You cannot leave. You will feed it, and in feeding it, you will live. For a moment, her heart pounded violently. She wanted to throw herself into the darkness, to sink into the snow and die, to escape the horror, but she could not. The fire held her, tethered her, a cruel promise. Each strike of a match had drawn her closer to it, and now there was no turning back. She understood the truth. The flame was alive, and it wanted her, not merely her warmth, not merely her fear, but her life itself. And the grandmother entity was its keeper, its guardian, its devourer, wearing the familiar face of love and safety to lure her in. The little girl gasped, her body shook uncontrollably. She wanted to scream, to cry, to beg, but the fire wrapped around her like chains. One final strike, her hand moved trembling, striking the match against the stone. The flame erupted, the world collapsed. She found herself standing on a vast plain of black fire, stretching infinitely in every direction. The children appeared around her, some trapped in flames, some frozen along the edges, their faces twisted in terror and pleading. They reached toward her, silent voices screaming, but she could not hear. The grandmother entity towered above the fire, a monstrous shape of shadow and flame. Its arms coiled, each finger writhing like living serpents. Its eyes glowed with hunger and memory, and its smile split impossibly wide. Strike and survive. For a moment, it hissed. Strike or be consumed. The little girl's chest heaved. She realized, with a horror that clawed at her bones, that the matches had been feeding the entity, pulling her closer, binding her to this endless cycle. Every spark, every flicker of light had been a doorway into its world, a chain securing her to the fire. Her teeth chattered, her fingers were raw and bleeding. She pressed the match to the stone, struck it. The flame exploded, and in that light she saw it fully. The grandmother entity's true form emerged, vast, shadowed, writhing with tongues of fire, a maw that stretched infinitely, devouring light and memory alike. Its arms reached outward, each fingertip touching the edges of existence itself. The children's faces flickered in the blaze, their forms twisting and stretching. And she understood. The flame was not warmth, not comfort. It was hunger. It fed on hope, on innocence, on the spark of life. And it had claimed her in every flicker she had struck. The little girl's vision broke, shattering into fragments. She saw her own reflection in the fire, pale, raw, trembling, bound by the light she had created. She understood that she was part of this cycle now. Each strike had fed the entity, and now she could do nothing but continue or be consumed. The fire surged, pushing outward, black edges curling toward her. The grandmother entity leaned in, whispering, "Now you see, now you understand. You belong, forever and always." Her fingers shook. She pressed the match to the stone, striking it one final time. The light engulfed her, searing her mind, and for a brief moment she felt warmth, pure, terrifying, and fleeting. She saw the children, the entity, the fire, all at once. She understood the hunger, the cycle, the endless tether, and she realized that to survive, even for a moment, she would have to endure it all. The fire roared, the shadows twisted, the children reached, and the grandmother entity's arms coiled tighter. The little girl stood at the heart of it, trembling, terrified, but alive for now. The final match flared violently in her trembling hands, throwing shadows across the endless plain of black fire. The grandmother entity loomed above, vast and monstrous, arms coiling like living shadows, its impossibly wide smile glinting with jagged teeth. Strike one final spark, or be consumed. Her body shivered from cold and fear, but she could not let go. Every match she had struck had bound her closer to this fire, closer to the entity's hunger. The children she had glimpsed, pale, hollow-eyed, trapped in the blaze, reached toward her silently, but they were already claimed. Understanding washed over her. The flame was not warmth or comfort, it was hunger, and it had tethered her to its world. To survive, she had to endure it, even for a fleeting moment. Her fingers pressed the match to the stone. She struck it. The flame erupted, searing her mind, illuminating the true form of the entity, vast, coiling, devouring, eyes blazing with eternal hunger.
The children twisted in the fire, reaching, trapped in the endless cycle. She was part of it now, bound to the flame, tethered to the entity, yet still alive. Survival came at a terrifying cost.
The grandmother entity whispered, soft and eternal,
"Welcome home, little one. You belong."
The little girl shivered, but in the searing heat, the consuming darkness, and the endless hunger, she was alive, part of the fire, part of the cycle, forever tethered to its heart. Somewhere beyond, snow fell silently on the empty streets, carrying the memory of a little girl who had tried to sell matches on a cold winter night.